Okay, here we go. All right. So remember in that framework of the 5 things, right? We're going to get to the numbers. And when we come up on it, I'll say, okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to get really detailed about um, two big things. We're going to clarify 2 big things. One of them is what your monthly expenses are going to be, and the other is how closing costs work, and sort of demystifying a little bit what you're buying. Because when you have closing costs, it's not just one big lump of money. There's actually things that you're buying. So we're going to talk through that as well. And they go, okay, great. And then I always start here. So I start on the monthly payment part. And this goes, and Joe, I'll say this to you. I do this. Actually, I did this with Jeff and Elizabeth. I do the first top of this page first, the loan structure, which you see here. Mm-hmm. Then I go over and I do closing costs. Then I come back and I do monthly cost. So that's the order.
Okay.
And you'll see that's just the flow that I do it. And I'll even say, I'll go, okay, we're going to come back to monthly payment. But first, I just want to help you understand closing. All right, so here we go. So first, let's talk about your loan in general. And if you're using the spreadsheet, then I will explain. I make a point to say the reason that you're seeing 2 columns is so if, for instance, you guys are like, hey, we want to spend up to 300,000, but what would it look like if we spent 350,000? You can just see them side by side. That's the only reason we have 2 columns here. And I'll explain that. Okay. So then I'll go, all right, so we've talked about, 350,000. Actually, before I go on, I'll say this too. When I'm setting this up, I'll say to them, as we go through these numbers, I'm going to be very, very conservative. So where it helps you, I'm going to make it smaller, and where it hurts you, I'm going to round up. So just so you know, the idea of this exercise is to give you the worst case scenario, so that if you kind of can swallow these pills of closing costs and monthly payment, and you get this and it feels okay, you'll sort of know when you see a place, okay, I know how this fits in dollars and cents wise. That's a reason for going through this. All right. So let's say we've talked about a top line of $350,000. So first thing, Joe, how much are you guys planning to put down? And that's the question I'll ask. Now there's a percentage here. A lot of times this just happened to me again. Last one of these buyer meetings I had this year, where I went, how much are you planning to put down? And they were like, 10 or 15. And it was like, okay, percent or dollars, or percent or thousands? And the answer was thousands. So there's a huge difference. You can't make any assumption there, right? So I'll say, how much are you putting down? And let's say they go, well, we think about 10% down. A lot of times when you come to this question as well, the way they'll answer it is they'll go, well, in total, this just happened on one of the meetings I had too. They'll go, we have $40,000. So we're thinking that, I don't know, what would that be, like 10 or 15% down? And then kind of on the fly, you'll have to know, okay, 10% of 350,000 is 35. They have 40. Let's do it at 10% but it's important that you sort of clarify what this is. So let's say they said 10%. Okay, great. It calculates in. So I'll say, okay, so your down payment on a $350,000 purchase, and I'll keep coming back and I'll always say that your down payment on a $350,000 purchase is $35,000. That makes the amount of money that you're borrowing $315,000. Great. Then I'll say, there's different kinds of mortgages that you can get. Has anybody ever explained the difference to you between what an ARM loan is or a fixed rate loan? Have you heard those terms before? And usually no matter what they say, I do a quick explanation either way. So, especially if it's a husband and wife, the husband always sort of like knows, and the wife just sort of like goes,
yeah.
And so I go, well, let me just do a quick explanation. So on an ARM loan, ARM stands for adjustable rate and this is almost exactly what I say. So actually, I'll back up. I say it's something like this. So whenever you see something in the Wall Street Journal, or you see some kind of interest rate being advertised, typically what you're seeing is a 30-year fixed rate loan, meaning you're going to borrow $315,000 at an interest rate of, let's say it's 4%. And based on that, you're going to have a monthly payment, and that monthly payment is going to be the same for 360 equal payments, which is 30 years worth of payments. And your interest rate is, let's say, for instance, in this case, 4%. What an ARM is, ARM stands for adjustable rate mortgage. So when you're on a 5-year ARM, here's what that means. This is kind of cool. Instead of giving you a 4% rate, we're going to give you a rate of 3%. It's going to save you, let's say hundreds of dollars per month. But the end of whatever that ARM period of time is,
7 or 10 years.
it can adjust. Right. And I'll always say to people, because 5-year ARMs are most often talked about, but I'll go, these ARMs can be anything: 3-year ARMs, 5-year ARMs, 7-year ARMs, 6.5-year ARMs. They'll calculate any way you want. They'll do these ARMs. At the end of that period of time, the interest rate can adjust. Now, what a lot of people will say if you're explaining this is, I'll go, yeah, they can adjust up. And I'll go, okay, they can. Here's everything though. They can also adjust down. And they did. And they have. So know that as well. Now, with this very, very low interest rate world, the chance of them adjusting down is unlikely, let's say 5 years
also,
from now.
the chance of them adjusting up isn't like crazy either, right?
Indeed. Well, right. I mean, I was about to say 5 years ago, I would have said, like, there's no way these rates are going to be what they are 5 years from now. And they're probably better than they were 5 years ago.
I remember when I was like guaranteed rate talking to him about it. He's like, I have an ARM and it doesn't even make sense for me to refinance, because even if I did, like, I'd still be at like 4%.
Right. Yeah. And there's whatchamacallit,
it's based off like the London interbank offer rate and an index. So
right.
whatever the bank can make off of it. He's like, the LIBOR's so low,
right,
that I'm.
Yeah, right. And there's rules on the adjustments as well. So like, I think in the first year, they can only adjust as much as 2%.
Yeah. Right.
So, right. Especially in the case of where you have an insanely low ARM, even that 2% hit, if you were to get it, is still better than what you could refinance for. And if you saw interest rates go, anyway, I don't get into all that with them, but I'll explain to them what an ARM is. And I'll explain to them that there's different points of an ARM. If, for instance, you knew that you were definitely going to sell this place and move in, let's say 5 years, maybe you would get a 7-year ARM, save a bunch of money while you owned it. However, I can tell you, and I'll say it this way, anybody that thinks with a real estate investing mind, because the interest rates are so low and you don't know what your future is going to bring, you don't know that this property isn't something that you keep longer term. When you go in, you're probably looking at a 30-year fixed rate, and they go, great. Remember that the reason that I go over that, Joe, is not to explain it to them. It's to show them that I'm competent in explaining things. Do you know what I mean? And like, I'm putting the show on a little bit. Interest rates, this is where you kind of have to know coming into the meeting, what do interest rates look like right now? And if I were doing this today, I would probably use 4%. I'd go, hey, they're really drifting below that, but we're going to do it at 4. If rates are at 4 or 4.125, I'll use 4.5, because I just want to, again, I want to be conservative. You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
Okay. So I'll say that. I'll go interest rate. And then again,
I know this stuff pretty well. It's going through and actually saying each thing.
That's exactly right. That's Joe, that exact thing is the difference between being an agent and just being somebody that knows stuff.
Yeah. Don't skip any of this.
Right. That's right. Right. This is a show. You're showing your competence. And the cadence of it and all that stuff is it's confidence building. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, if you were sitting across from somebody that was really hardcore about it, for some reason, this has never really happened to me, but if somebody just was like, I don't need any of this explained to me, then I'm still, it's in a spreadsheet here. You still model it, and you can go, okay, so I will just skip ahead and do it really fast or whatever, but that's not, that's almost never it. So, okay, so we've modeled this. Hey, what we're going to do now, Joe, is we're going to go look at your closing costs. Okay. And when we look at, so this, okay, hold on, let me just do this, 30 to 35,000. So when we talk about, this is the way I say it. So when we talk about closing costs, I want to change the language of this, Joe, a little bit. It's not really about sort of fees or closing costs. This spreadsheet that we're going to go over right here is really just a simple way to put it is, including your down payment, what is all the cash that you need in order to close this purchase? That's what I'm going to show you. Okay. So the first thing is really easy. We already talked about it, is what's the down payment on the thing that you're going to buy? So the first one on a $350,000 purchase at 10% down is $35,000. Okay. The next thing is this thing called rate discount points or origination fees. So I'll explain it to you this way. Think about you're renting money, right? You're going to go and you're going to borrow money for this loan. Um, Banks get this money wholesale mostly from the same places. So the way they compete against each other is to offer you a better interest rate. But how are they going to offer a better interest rate if they don't have a lot of movement on it? I'll often say to them, if you've ever bought a diamond before for somebody, or if you think about, the commodities market, barrels of oil, they're the same barrels of oil. I mean, how do you compete? Well, one of the ways that banks compete is they charge you what are called rate discount points. And what it is, it's just kind of a fee that sort of gets slid into your good faith estimate. And it's a way for them to go, hey, we can give you an interest rate of 3.875 instead of 4. And in your good faith estimate and in your closing costs, there might be a fee in here of say $1,500 or $900 or whatever. Because if they take a little bit of cash from you, they can offer you a little bit better interest rate on the back end. And it just kind of gets muddled into your closing costs. Now, this is not uncommon. And in fact, it's common almost in every single situation, but I always like you to understand what you're buying. And so if you get pre-approval or if you get a good faith estimate or something like that, and you want to send it to me, I can help translate that. Or when you guys, if you decide to start shopping rates or anything like that, I can look at those documents for you and help you understand, okay, how do we make this apples to apples? Because this is one of the ways that lenders make it difficult to understand things apples to apples. Although it happens all the time, there's nothing weird about it. I can help decipher this. And they go, oh.
Because isn't that one thing that they do a lot too, is like, if we're talking the interest rate being 4 in this case, like a lender could give you like 3.8 and bump this up to like 2,500.
Yeah. Yeah. Or less. I mean, it really depends.
Versa, they'll make that, or I'm sorry, they'll make the rate like 4.5 and the fee will be nothing.
Exactly. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I mean, you were talking to me about lender paid PMI the other day.
Right.
Which is a way of taking a higher interest rate and then the end, and I think that's, I don't think there's anything wrong with any of that stuff. And I think that's a good one to bring up if you were talking to somebody or whatever, if you're trying to give it another example. But it's like, as long as what the point of going over this is, no one's really getting screwed. It's just important that you understand what you're buying and what value you're getting. That's why we're going over this. That's what I'd say to a client. You know what I mean? And they're appreciative. And I don't care. I don't fucking know anybody, Joe, that comes into that meeting and knows all this shit. I've never met that person, including people that have owned houses before. They don't fucking know. I can talk to most agents and they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's kind of, this is what I want to, and I feel like I know it good enough, but it's not, it's regurgitating it.
Yeah, you said it right before. We know the stuff. It's, can I make it digestibly explainable, or can I explain it in a way to these people so that they get value out of the explanation and it's clear, right? Can I simplify it well enough? That's all this is. Plus, they're not going to remember half the shit. You know what I mean? So then I go, okay, so that's rate discount or origination fees. Next thing is called title. So title, whenever you buy a piece of property, you're going to buy this thing called a title insurance policy. What this title insurance policy, does is ensures that the property that you're buying is free and clear of any liens against it. Let me explain how liens work. Let's say that, and the way that I'll do this is let's say we're sitting in the office right now, and this room that we're sitting in is your condo, if it's a condo buyer. And I'll say this building that we're sitting in is your condo building, right? Let's say now that you have a contractor come in and you put a kitchen on it, and the guy says, okay, it's a $20,000 kitchen. You have to give me $10,000 up front and $10,000 when we're done. Okay, no problem. You give him $10,000. You get to the end of the project. He goes, here's a kitchen. And you go, and he says, okay, give me the 10 grand. And then you go, sorry, I don't have the 10 grand. He places what's called a lien against your property. It's called a mechanics lien. When you now go to sell your property to somebody else, if you were to go take your deed and give it to another person, and that person gave you a suitcase full of cash, you could give them the deed, you could take the cash, now they own the property. The issue that they would have when they buy the thing is that they would also have the lien that sits against that property on that unpaid kitchen. In your case, when you're buying, your lender will make you buy an insurance policy that says that there are no liens against this property. And if there's any that we don't know about, you, the buyer, or you, the new owner, when it were to happen, and it never does, but if it were, you would not have to pay for that lien. To buy that insurance policy, you're going to be anywhere from, let's just call it around $2,500. And I do 0.75% here, Joe. Okay, makes sense. So I'll explain it to those people. You have to buy the title insurance policy. Okay. Lender fees. A lender's just going to charge you fees just to do their stuff. Oh, yeah.
So this is something that I want to be able to like tell people that, oh, there's title fees. I feel like I just blow by it, but I want to give them that understanding. So whenever you buy a piece of property, you need to buy title insurance policy.
Whenever you buy a piece of property with a loan, your lender will require you to buy a title insurance policy.
And the purpose of this policy is to make sure that the property's free and clear of any liens.
Right. One of the things I like to say somewhere in here too, language-wise, is I'll say, I may have said this with Jeff and Elizabeth, I say it all the time, where I'll say, because liens go with property, they don't go with people. And they go, oh, right. So you'll part of your closing costs, right? It's always nice to bring it back to context, right? So part of your closing costs are you buying a title insurance policy, and this title insurance policy ensures that there's nothing that's against that property that would somehow have to cost you money. And if it did, you're covered. Your lender will require you to have that. Most people, by the way, even in a cash sale, cash situation, I think buy title insurance. So, but that language of it's required, it's not, I think technically you can buy property and not buy title insurance, but
so whenever you buy a piece of property with the loan, your lender will require you to buy a title insurance policy.
Yep.
Purpose of this policy is to make sure the property is free and clear of any liens. Liens go with the property, that they don't go with the people. Part of your closing costs, are you buying this to protect you? And then,
yeah, like I always think an example would be good. What if the people that you bought this house from put a roof on it and never paid the contractor? Right. And you don't know about that. And now somebody comes to you as the new owner and goes, hey, this property owes me 40 grand. Well,
we used to do this in my old job, we'd place receiver liens on properties if we didn't get paid. So we would, and basically what would happen is if they sold the company or whatever we were managing, they'd have to pay us. It was like some astronomical fee because the receiver fees collect like an insane amount of interest. It's just such, yeah.
Okay, you good on that?
Yes, that helps.
Yeah, so it's, it's like a get it in your mouth thing, right? Like practice the explanation.
That's really what this for me is, just like I said, it's just saying it the right way and actually saying it. Most importantly. Yeah, that's right. And explaining and like watching the room, like not thinking less about getting the words out and more about, are they getting this? Are the lights going on? Yeah.
Those are probably the hardest parts on this page. Then I go to the next thing, which is lender fees. And it's really simple. And I'll say, okay, lender fees. So on top of everything else, a lender, because everyone does this, they're going to charge you some kind of fee. I write $1,500 down here. A lot of times what you'll see, Joe, is $800 or something, right? It's not always this high. But again, I'm rounding up. It's probably more like 1,000 typically. And these are just all of the fees that they charge you. You will go crazy, Joe, if you try to figure out what all of their little fees add up to and whether or not they make sense or something. They don't. You'll see stuff on your closing statement like $75 to FedEx something somewhere. Or, I mean, I've seen email preparation fee before for like $80, It's just, they're just going to charge you these fees. And if to make life easier, I always say it's going to be this $1,500. And it probably won't be this high. So that's that. Homeowners insurance. Let me explain how homeowners insurance works. If you buy there's two ways to do this, Joe. If I'm doing it With a condo, what I would say is, okay, again, we're sitting in this room, and in this room is your condo, and in the Compass building here, this is your condo building. Um, if, let's say, the building caught on fire and burned to the ground and everybody was okay and nobody was hurt, what happens? Well, are you familiar with paying your homeowners association fees every month? Because we haven't talked about it yet in this meeting. You guys understand that you have HOAs, and they say, yeah, most of the time. They go, yeah, you pay your monthly fee. Right. Part of what you're paying for, and that's the way I explain it to them, right? Because it starts to show value to them. So when you pay your monthly homeowners, part of what you're paying for is this insurance policy that your building has. The building itself has proof of insurance. When you bought, or if they owned before, if not, like when your owner bought, or if anybody buys a condo, there has to be part of the lending process that shows that the building actually has insurance for the building itself. So the building burns down, the insurance policy for the building rebuilds the building, but inside your unit, nothing is covered. That master insurance policy doesn't cover it. So you'll want to have what's called personal property insurance. The reason I put 0 here in a condo situation is because it's so nominal. I mean, it's going to be $10 or $15 a month on the highest side. If you were buying a single family home, it's different. You have to have homeowners insurance that protects the actual structure in the building itself, and it's usually more like $100 per month. But I mean, literally in a condo situation, it would not be unreasonable to put
Is it really
$15
that?
here. What's that?
Really? I didn't
Yeah.
know it was that cheap.
Because here's the thing, you're covering in a condo situation. Say it again.
I thought it was like $100 a month.
I don't know. I mean, if you have a home, it is. If you have a house, it's more.
Right.
Because the whole building can burn down. But in this case, remember that a lot of the insurance heavy lifting is done by the building. The structure of the building itself is separately insured. So all that's being insured on your policy is everything inside those walls.
Got it.
But I always take a moment if I have an opportunity.
Like renters insurance, right?
It's exactly renter's insurance. It's actually not any different. It's funny. I have said a million times in this meeting where I'll go, do you have renter's insurance? And they'll say, yes. And I'll say, actually, it's not called renter's insurance. It's called personal property insurance. And that's what this is. You're having the same thing. The only difference, and I love saying this when I'm doing this in a buyer consultation, is the only difference here is you have to cover more than your clothes and, your TVs and all that stuff. You also have to cover your toilets and your cabinets and your appliances and your sinks and your countertops and all that other stuff. And again, you'll talk to an insurance person, but it's inexpensive, generally speaking. And so that's how I explain homeowners insurance. By the way, before we go any further, these are closing costs. So that was monthly payment that I put there. Really, if you had a single family home buyer, you have to prepay a year's worth of homeowners insurance before you close. So a lot of times I'll use $1,200, right? $100 a month times 12, a year's worth of homeowners insurance on a single family home or a building.
If it's a
something like that. Condo would be not, you don't have to do it for a year in a condo. A lot of times in condos, they don't even make you show proof of personal property insurance. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I've seen it many different ways.
Not that you did.
I mean, some lenders may require it. They may require it with less than 20% down. I mean, I think there's different.
And that was the thing, is I freaked out because in the beginning with the deal I did on Lemoyne, he didn't have an insurance policy yet. And he was asking me, I'm like, dude, we close like in a day. And then I called the lender, like, you don't need to.
It's a condo, right?
Yeah. It's like 2 years. But I thought that you had to have.
No. Not in a condo.
The homeowner's insurance policy is really for single family homes.
Yes. Yeah, or buildings or whatever. I mean, I have actually mine's called an apartment policy on my 3-flat. The Chicago house and this house are, they're homeowner policies, and they're escrowed just like taxes are.
Right.
Or does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just I was wrong the whole time I explained that. Like, you don't escrow. If you're buying a condo, you're not escrowing.
Correct. Right. Now, that is to say, who knows? Maybe there's some lender out there that does escrow condo personal property insurance, but generally speaking, no. Should. Well, I mean, right. This is an estimate. and things can always be a little bit different, but no, I wouldn't expect in a condo situation for you to be escrowing homeowners insurance, nor showing a 1-year prepaid policy at the time of closing. That's why this says 0 if it's a condo. And it says 1,200 if it's a single family home.
Got it. Okay.
Makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Okay. The next one is loan interest. So, I'll explain it. Actually, I'll explain it to you just like you're a client. Okay. So this is what I say. All right, Joe, the day you close on the purchase of your new place, you're going to pay interest on your loan from that day through the end of that month. And this is the way I'll say it to clients exactly. So I'll say, okay, so today, Joe, is Saturday, April 4th. There's 30 days in April. If you were to close today, you would owe 26 days worth of interest, right? 30 days in April, today's the 4th, 26 days are left. You'd pay 26 days worth of interest. If you were to close at the end of the month, let's say on the 29th, you would only owe a day or two worth of interest. Make sense? The way that I model this is as if you're going to close on the 15th of the month. So what this number is that you're seeing here is a half month's worth of just the interest on your loan. But the reason we put this here is because this will be part of the cash that you'll need to bring to close. You'll have to pay interest from your loan from that day through the end of that month. Now, remember, at the end of this, you're just going to get one big lump number. You're not going to go through and write all these separate checks. But this is going to be, if you close closer to the end of the month, this number would be smaller. If you closed near the front of the month, it would be a little bit bigger. But here's another thing I want you to understand. The day you close and you pay interest from that day through the end of that month, the next month, you don't have a mortgage payment due. So again, let's do this as if it's happening right now. Saturday, April 4th, you're closing. You can't close on a Saturday, but okay, you're closing on Saturday, April 4th. You pay your 26 days worth of interest. You do your closing today. They give you your keys. You move in. On May 1st, you do not have a mortgage payment. Your first mortgage payment won't be due until June 1st. So it's round to the first of the month following your closing. Add a month. That's when your first mortgage payment will be due. And then I'll say this. I'll go, let me explain why this is. When you pay a mortgage, you're always paying for the month that you just lived there. So when you pay, if on May 1st you were to pay your mortgage, you would be paying for the month of April, but you didn't live there the whole month of April. You got there on the 4th. So the day you close, they go, listen, just give us the 26 days of interest. You don't have a payment in May, but you're living there. And then on June 1st, you're paying for when you lived there in May. When you pay rent, you're always paying for the month you're about to live there. So it's a little bit of a difference. So that's why this is.
Got it.
Does that make sense? It's also why it feels like a free month if you have a lease that terminates in the same month that you close on a purchase, right? Because it goes like this. Let's say you're closing at the, you close April 4th today. Okay. And then your lease is up at the end of April. So you take a week, you paint the place, you move all your shit in. April 30th, you move out of your rental. Well, May 1st, you don't have a rent payment due because you moved out. You're not there anymore. And you don't have a mortgage payment due because you closed on April 4th, paid your 26 days worth of interest. You don't have a payment due on May 1st. So if you were to close April 4th and your lease ended April 30th, for instance, you would have no payment due May 1st. I always will say to people, it feels like a free month. It's definitely not a free month. And they always laugh. I go, there are no free months in this. There's no free days in this.
Oh, right. Because
but it feels like it.
You're basically the first month. This prepaid is basically the only month that you're prepaying. Everything else. After.
You got it. That's exactly right. And the lender, I mean, look how fucking selfish they are. They're like, look, we don't care about principal right now. Just give us the interest on the rent for this first 26 days, if it were today. Right? We don't give a shit. And then on June 1st, start paying your regular mortgage, you know? Yeah. They're like, but we're renting you this money for these 26 days and you are paying us the rent on that 26 days of money being borrowed, you know? But that's exactly right, Joe.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense now. Okay.
These are a little bit of a finer point. But I think necessary in showing competence, my competence. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff where if you can get really good at explaining sort of what's going on here in a succinct way, you look just real smart without anybody having to be like, you don't have to be like, I sell all this shit. And like, I'm really, you know what I mean? Like Buyers Home Teams, you know, top 50 last year anyway team. You know, we're still going to be a $30 million team next year, maybe more. It's like when you have when we have the results anyway, and we can explain and be super competent, it's like you're unstoppable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, practicing is important. Okay. Taxes and escrow. Let's talk about how this works. So it's weird because I'm so much more used to doing this face to face. And I sort of flip papers over and I draw things on them, but I'll do this thing where I'll go, hey, let me explain how taxes and escrow work. Or I'll say, have you ever heard that phrase before, putting your taxes in escrow? And they'll go, yeah, don't your lender takes? And you go, yeah, let me explain how it works. So then I'll draw a big M and a circle around. I go, when you make your mortgage payment every month, your mortgage payment is actually being broken out into a few different things. Number one is principal. So the amount of your balance every month when you pay your mortgage, it goes down. Principal goes down. Okay. Interest, the rent on your on the money that you're borrowing. Obviously, you have to pay interest on it. And the third one is taxes. Now, with taxes, you go, well, why am I paying taxes to my lender? Here's why. Cook County puts taxes out twice a year, Joe. They do it, then they're due March 1st and they're due September 1st. And in a situation like yours, on a $350,000 purchase, I would assume that your taxes on an annual basis are going to be, let's just say on the high side, about $7,000 per year. So in your mind, you have to kind of be good at doing the quick math of this, right? So if you go, all right, $7,000 per year are your taxes, and there's only two bills, your lender, this is the way I'll say it to people, is I'll go, your lender's going to treat you like a criminal in general. But in one of the ways that they're going to do that is they're going to say, well, you couldn't possibly be adult enough to handle two bills for $3,500. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to take that $7,000, which are your annual taxes as an estimate, right? We're going to take $7,000. We're going to divide that by 12, and that comes to $583 per month. Each month, you're going to take $583, and we're going to add that to your mortgage payment, and we're just going to take all that tax from you. Then when Cook County sends tax bills out, you don't even have to do anything. We're going to pay the taxes for you. Now, the day you close, you're going to have to open up that tax escrow account with some money. Okay. Now, I usually write $1,000 here, but it could be a little bit more. It could be a number of months that they want. It could be a lot less than this. I've seen it open for $50, but part of what you'll be doing on the day of the closing, part of the money that you'll bring is to open up that account of taxes. It's actually still your money. It just sits at your lender now, and it's there for paying taxes. Does that make sense?
Yes. Taxes are, it's what, March and September here?
So March 1st and September 1st is the way I'll say it. I'll go, Cook County has
Oh, but they require 3 months either way.
Not necessarily. Often require, right? It depends. So this is kind of slushy too. I'll say, I mean, the way that this calculates is 3 months. I don't even know if it's right on the first page. Hold on. Oh yeah. Wait. Oh, 1.5. I did. This is a little light. I should update this. Yeah, it should be more like that. So the way that this calculates, Joe, is 3 months. Okay. But I'll say to them, I'll go, look, this is really overestimated. A lot of times it'll be like $1,000 or $500 or $50. You know what I mean? But
It depends on where you are
in the year,
right?
It can. Yes, it can. That's another thing. That's right. It may depend. It's important as you're explaining this to people that a lot of this is going to depend on the end lender. So what I do is I'm really conservative here, right? Do I think a lender generally is going to take $1,750. Probably not. That's a lot. But you're right. Sometimes they'll calculate it. Where are we in the year? Sometimes it depends on how much money you're putting down.
Paid and they need to, right. If the tax bill is just paid and
Yes.
they need to see that,
Yes. Right.
they might put it.
There's a lot of different things that could
Okay.
make this move. I think that this is a good way to do it, dollars and cents wise. Plus, no one at this meeting is going to question this. That's your question is good, but I don't think it's worth discussing with a client, right? I think it's like, hey, just get ready to give him $1,500. You know what I mean?
I'm getting into the tiny details that are putting my brain in a pretzel and they're already glazed over it.
Well, but it's good to know. It's good for you to know it, because I don't know, if you get a savvy buyer sitting there or somebody asks you a question, then you can go, well,
you think it's better to
right.
I know. I just remember, is it better to just put my money in an interest-bearing account and then I'll just pay my own taxes? Like, whatever you want.
The answer to that question is you probably won't be able to if you want an attractive rate. Part of the risk analysis here is that you keep your taxes escrowed with your lender. So yeah, you can ask. I mean, the way I would answer that is I would go, yeah, Joe, you can ask your lender, but you might suffer a rate change that way would outplay the amount of interest that you would get if you just escrowed it with your lender. But yeah, you can ask.
Got it.
Right. I love the validation of being like, yeah, you can ask. Here's what you'll probably find is that your rate will go up and they'll consider it a higher risk loan because they like taking that control.
Got it. Okay.
And by the way, I've been asked that question before, and I'll say that response and people will go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Right. They'll go, oh, I don't, they wanted to ask the tough guy finance question.
Like, I didn't want to worry about it.
Right.
Like, I'd rather just pay it.
Right. We're not talking about, you're not buying a $25 million mansion where the, taxes are $600,000 a year and you're leaving, I don't know, $50,000 on the table or something like that. We're talking about hundreds of dollars.
I always say, like, yeah. Well, then
it's actually not hundreds of dollars. It's way less than that.
And if it's padded and you pay too much into it, you get that money back.
That's right. That's a good thing to say here too. Here's the thing. If you end up where the taxes go down or this ends up being too much money, this is always, I love that. I've said this before in this meeting, and it's just good comfort language where I'll go, here's the thing. This is always your money. It's always yours. It's just sitting there. And if there's ever too much, they're going to give you money back. So, but this is how getting, taxes done works. All right. Good there.
Yeah. Hang on. Let me just finish this.
Sure.
That's what I really want out of this, is to just make this just in a way that I can say it back to people. So I have the lender doesn't want you to miss tax payments. They take the yearly tax bill divided by 12, and you need to pay at least 3 months into that. The day you close, you'll have to open up that account. If the bill is just paid, they may require you to pay the highest amount, which that would be indicated in this worst case scenario that we presented. And it's basically everything we just went over with overpayment and the escrow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's right. And then find your words to explain that.
I'm just trying to put it in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
See if I can say this is what they want. Just bullet point it.
Yeah. I always try to make it sound as folksy as I can. Like, the lender's going to want you to make sure that you're up to date on your loan. So here's what they're going to do this, and it's a good service. I always make this joke where I'll go, it feels like this is a really convenient thing, but they're not actually doing it to make it convenient for you, or they're not doing it to be nice. They're doing it because if you don't pay your taxes, the government gets your house first, and they want your house first if you don't pay your taxes, or if you don't pay your, mortgage or whatever. And people always laugh. Right. But okay, so that's taxes and escrow. Attorneys, we use attorneys here in Chicago. It's a little bit weird. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have one last question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Why is it that the banks don't want you to, like, I know that it's because they don't want you to miss the payment, but what happens if you did miss that payment? Like, what's the repercussion on that?
So if you missed a tax payment?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a great question.
You considered a default, right?
Yeah. Well, here's what happens. If you don't, let's say you've somehow waived escrow and you're paying your own taxes and you don't pay your taxes. There's a lien against your property, goes to a tax sale, all that stuff. And eventually, the government will come along and they'll collect by whatever, claiming the house. Let's think of it in a more common scenario. Somebody goes bankrupt. They don't pay their mortgage at all. And along with not paying their mortgage, they don't pay their taxes. They move out of the house, whatever, they go somewhere else. And eventually the house is repossessed and it goes to tax sale first. Government always gets first right of lien. So the government's going to go, okay, we have to sell this house to get the cash. They sell it for an already low price. And then the government's going to get all their back taxes, all of their fees, all of their interest, all of that stuff. And then the second place lien holder will be the bank, who now has suffered a bunch of fees, right? So the lender will, even if you don't pay your taxes, generally,
as much on the collateral, right?
That's exactly right. They want to be first in line. They don't want to be second in line. And that's why they'll pay your taxes for you if you don't pay them.
I think the best way for me to put this is that the bank wants to collect on their collateral first. I know that's not a great.
You'll find it.
So the bank wants to collect on their collateral first. So having you escrow limits the chances of you defaulting, going to a tax sale, and having the government be the first place lien holder on the house.
I usually don't even explain it that far.
Yeah, I just want to know this also for my own.
Yeah. If somebody savvy gets into a conversation and asks about it, it's cool to know and to be able to explain it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Got it?
Attorney fees. Yeah.
Attorney fees are funny. In Chicago, we close with attorneys. The fee that they're going to charge you, you probably heard me say this to Jeff and Elizabeth, they're transactional. So this isn't one of those things where, oh my gosh, if I call my attorney, they get paid $400 an hour in 30-minute increments. It's nothing like that. You pay a single fee. I write $700 here, but usually you're going to be $500-$600. Jeff Woods, who we refer our clients to, is generally $500, and I usually yell at him that he's not charging enough. So that's what this is. It's a one-time fee. You'll pay it at the closing to the attorney. One of the things that you can say here is, let's just be clear about what an attorney does. We haven't gone all the way through the process yet, but there's an attorney review process that happens concurrently with your inspection. And what happens is an attorney is able to make modifications to the contract that you're in on your behalf. And they're going to put in writing and tighten up all the language around if there are, let's say, inspection requests to get remedied, or changes to a close date, or anything that we would do sort of after the fact and all agree to. Your attorney buttons that all up and makes it as an addendum to your contract. And finally, the thing that they do is, at the day of the closing, when you're signing those millions of documents that says over and over again, no, I swear to God, I'll pay my loan. They sit there and they explain what each of those documents are before you sign them. They sit next to you and do that as well. So they make it all official, legal, represent your legal interests. They have a fiduciary responsibility to you specifically. And then the day of the closing, they actually explain to you while you're signing everything, what they do. So that's kind of what my pitch on an attorney will be. Is really simple. If the person sitting across from you is like, yeah, I get it, you have attorneys, I'm not going to go too far into it. I'm going to go, attorney's a transactional attorney, they're going to charge you about $700 for the whole thing. They'll go, great. And then I'll keep going, right? If they're really talky and they want to talk it through, then I might do an explanation. If they stop at every point and they converse and they just are, again, I've met these talky people and I've gone on and on and on and on and on, and I'll share stories and blah, 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 but if it's like, yeah, let's keep it moving. And they're not even doing that sometimes because they're annoyed. They're just sort of like, yeah, I get attorneys. And you're like, okay, it's going to be about $700. And they'll go, great. And then I'll move on. You know what I mean? So like I'm reading the room as I'm doing this too. That's what comes with getting really good at it too, is you can go, I can speed it up or slow it down, or I can add or subtract things to it or whatever. Okay. Good on attorneys.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. It's city of Chicago. So Chicago charges you a sales tax for buying a piece of property in Chicago. You may have seen me do this with Jeff and Elizabeth. I do this even if they don't react. I'll say one of the things that we love to do is groan about Chicago, but I will start by saying there's nothing out of the ordinary about this sales tax. This is true in every municipality. In fact, ours in Chicago is pretty in line with what you'd expect. What it is 3/4 of the buyer buying a piece of property will pay 3/4 of 1%. And it's called a deed transfer stamp. It's essentially a small sales tax for buying a piece of property. And they'll go, great. So I'll say on a $350,000 purchase, $2,625. And they'll go,
You repeat that last part. Buyer pays 3/4 of 1%. It's deed transfer.
say it again. I'm getting a lot of feedback or something. I don't know what's going on. Oh, now you're all, I don't have you at all.
Deed transfer.
Oh, wait, start all the way over. Now I can hear you.
It's called the deed transfer stamp.
Yes. Yeah. City of Chicago charges it, and it's a small sales tax that a buyer gets charged when a piece of property sells. I also will say there's also a transfer stamp that a seller gets charged. That's 0.3 of 1%. So in addition to this 3/4 of 1% that the buyer pays, the seller pays 0.3 of 1%. So 0.30%. Now I'll say, so again, I'll always say, there's nothing strange about this. There's nothing out of the ordinary about this. This happens in every municipality. And in fact, in other large cities, it's much, much more expensive. And the example that I always use is Philadelphia. I'll say, for example, in Philadelphia, if you were buying, the transfer stamp is 2%. So let's put, and I'll do this, Joe, on purpose, because I just want them to feel better. I'll go, so for instance, think about this. You guys are buying a $350,000 place. 2% of that is $7,000. And here's the other thing. The seller would also be in Philadelphia being charged 2%. So it's a really high number. Chicago, from that perspective, is much lower. And there's suburbs that have a percentage that's much higher as well. So this is very normal, but it is significant. So we want to show it to you here. And they go, okay, great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I am heading that off at the pass. I don't want anybody walking out of this meeting being like, man, this is bullshit for any reason. I'm going to put this in context for them. That's always how I've pitched the transfer stamp. Miscellaneous. I would say, if you move into a building, a high rise, sometimes there's a move-in fee. Sometimes there's something out of the ordinary. I just like to throw $300 or $500 on the table here just in case, for various reasons. So we'll just do that. There's also this thing called a tax credit, Joe. The day you close, taxes for the previous year haven't been paid yet. And I'm not going to go too far into this calculation now, but there's a little bit of offset that you have with the amount of money that you need to bring, because the seller's going to actually have to give you money to pay taxes when the tax bills in the future come. So when we take all this stuff, all these things that we went over, and we add them all up, and you take that tax credit out, the amount,
the year that the seller lived there, basically.
Say it again, Joe.
It's taxes that you're paying for the time that the seller lived there.
Yes, and they're giving you the money to pay those taxes when they come due.
Got it.
I mean, here's the thing, my live version of this, I don't have this tax credit line. I have this in the spreadsheet because it's, it can be calculated on the fly, really quick. I usually don't show them this. But if I'm using the spreadsheet, which is probably the best way to do this in the wave of the future, spreadsheets, I put it in here, but right. I mean, if you start to get, if you want a longer form explanation, I can go, well, okay, here, let's use this. And I always do this when I get lost, or if someone's going to start asking about the stuff, I always bring it to right now. Okay, Joe, today's April 4th. Okay. Remember, tax bills were due March 1st. So when you pay your bill on March 1st, that's always for the first half of the previous year. So March 1st, 2020 pays for the first half of 2019. So now here we are, it's April 4th. First half of 2019 has been paid. You close on April 4th. The second half of 2019 has not been paid. So they have to give you The seller has to give you the second half of 2019 at the table. Then, because the seller owned the property from the 1st of January till today, April 4th, they're going to have to give you January, February, March, and then April 1, 2, 3, and 4, whatever that is to the day, right? It's 31, 28, and 31, 62. It's 90 days. Yeah, it's exactly 90 plus 4. It's 94 days. So they have to give you 94 days worth. So they're going to give the second half of last year, right? And that's what's being reflected here, is an estimate of roughly what that number will be. Make sense?
Yeah. Can you just repeat when the tax bill? So
Say that again.
I think I got it. I think I'm good.
Are you sure? I mean, I think at some point
I think it's when like the taxes are due that I'm not even overthinking. I'm just trying to piece it together in my brain, which isn't going very well right now. But I understand the concept of this is a credit for the taxes you're going to pay for when they live there. So they probably already paid the first half of 2019. You're going to have to pay the second half of 2019 plus.
I mean, I want to explain it in a different way, because you're going to have to pay is language I want to avoid. That sounds very scary, right? The day you close, they're going to give you money, right, to pay taxes
for when
tax bill comes due in the fall, because part of what's being paid for is taxes from when they lived there. They're going to give you money for that. And that's what you're getting here. And it's offsetting the amount of money that you need to bring. But I don't want to get too far into like, now you're going to have to pay this and then you're paying for it, because it confuses the matter. I want this mostly to be, I want to explain what this thing is. If they want to go in depth, I can, but I'm going to try to keep it, I'm skimming stones off the water a little bit, right? I'm going to go deeper where I want it to be deeper. And I'm going to keep it, you're right. And everything's being represented here. I mean, I'm not hiding anything, but I don't want to go too far down a path that doesn't need to be on down.
Yeah. Okay. So taxes from the previous year haven't been paid yet. So the seller gives you a credit indicated here so that when they come due, you can pay them.
I mean, yeah, right. I probably wouldn't even go, taxes haven't been paid yet. I'll say there's a thing called a tax credit. The seller's going to have to give you money to pay taxes as the tax bills come up in the future, because part of what's being paid for in that is time that they lived there. And this is going to offset how much you need to bring. I can explain this more and we can get more detailed on the exact calculation as you finally find the exact place you're going to buy. We can do this exercise where it's much more, we get much more precise about what the actual numbers are on the place that you buy. But there'll be an offset here. Long story short, you'll need to bring about $7,500. And this is an estimate. And I'll always stop and say, I just want to stop and make you understand that this is not exact numbers. There's a spreadsheet here that calculates, and I tell you that I pride myself on being within a few $100s, maybe $1,000 when we're this early in the process, but just be thinking maybe $8,000 on top of. And Joe, it's important that I explain this for them so that it's clear. On top of your down payment, you'll need about $8,000. Total cash needed, we'll call it $43,000. And when I explain this, I'll do it like that with a cadence where I'll go, so total cash you guys would need to buy this place, $43,000. And then I will pause. And then I'll say, any questions on that, or does that make sense to you guys? And then like, I'll try to get a little bit of like, yeah. I'll go, okay, great. And then from there, they could ask a couple questions like, I don't know that we're going to have 43. Or they'll go, I don't know. Or that looks good, or they'll go, that's less than we thought we would need, or whatever. You know what I mean? And it's just, but you're giving them an opportunity to react to this. You also, not for them, for you, want to see them react to this. You know what I mean? So forget the idea that like, okay, they get it. Like you want to see what they look like when they see $43,000. That's a big part of this.
They might be going, oh, we're only buying a $300,000 place on the low end.
Yes. No, for sure. It could be like, oh, this is much easier than we thought it was.
Or like the max we can buy is $250,000.
That's right. And then that's less common. Most of the time people come in, somewhat aware. Jeff and Elizabeth, I thought, were a great example of two people that came in using online tools that did not get them close enough, did not explain what they needed to understand, then got to our explanation and went, oh, this is much better and clearer and more precise. And then that was the end of it, right? So that's what's happening here is, in general, is we're taking all the bullshit that you can Google and we're making it actual. And we're making it about them, not about, I don't know, just reading shit or whatever. Like, it's about you. All right. So good. You're good on this?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, Joe, let's flip back and we're going to do the monthly payment last, right? So again, on a $350,000 purchase, that principal and interest portion, about $1,500. Remember that we're using as an assumption. Now it's going to be different property to property. And we'll talk about that when the time comes and whether or not it makes sense. But on the high end, about 2% of your purchase price will be your annual taxes. So what's being reflected here again is that what the monthly version of that 2% is on a $350,000 loan, and it's $583. Again, and I'm literally saying it this way. I'm referring back to things that we talked to. Remember, we talked about homeowners insurance. Again, in a condo situation like this, not really going to be a factor. So we're not going to have to worry about it here. Again, if it was a single family home, then I would say you're going to run about $100 per month. Okay. But in a condo, you're going to be zero. Assessments, I'm going to do an estimate here too. So if the person has sat here and said to me like, hey, we want to be in River North in a high rise and we want a pool and all this other bullshit, then I'm going to be like, okay, this is going to be whatever.
You're looking at a walk up 3 flat. It's going to be 250 to 300. Yeah.
Yes. And at this point, I'm not going to ask them a question. Hey, do you guys think that you'd be more interested in a high rise or more interested in a small building? By now, I should know. Right. I'm paying attention to them and I'm getting a feel for what they're going to be looking for. And again, we did have a conversation about, what they're looking for.
I was going to say with Elizabeth and Jeff, we might be saying, I mean, you guys could probably look between $150 and $300, probably on the high end, maybe a little bit more. But with Nick Kilferris, I mean, he's looking at South Loop. I mean, he could be looking anywhere $500 and $900.
That's right. And you should be, like when somebody goes, hey, we really want a smaller building, whatever. I mean, we think 100 or 150. Don't ever fucking write 100 here. That's ridiculous. It should always be at least 200, right? We're setting expectations, right? Or I'll even say if someone's like smaller building, I'll say I'm going to use for planning. I'm going to use about $250. If this was somebody that was like, hey, we can spend 300,000. We need this many bedrooms. We don't care about parking. A lot of those older buildings might have heat included, and I might think it might be something like this, right? But I'm not asking them. I'm assigning it to them. I'm going to go, based on what we see and what I think you guys are going to be looking for, I'm going to make an assumption here. You're probably going to be finding yourself in a monthly that looks something like this. And they go, okay, great. Yeah. And then last, of course, it comes down and it rolls up and it says, okay, on a 300, and I will say it this way. I don't go, okay, so about $2,100. Like, fuck that. Like I go, okay, so again, Joe, $350,000 purchase with 10% down, 4% interest rate, all in, rough estimate, you're going to be $2,000 to $2,100. And then I'll say this. I'll go just as a reminder, interest rate could be a little bit better. It might not. I think we're being pretty good here. Taxes, I probably estimated a little bit on the high end. Assessments are probably right on, but there's a chance that it could be a little bit lower than this. But I think if you're thinking 2,000 to 2,100, that's about what this thing is. And that's a good conservative estimate.
Yep.
Does that, and then I'm going to finish with a question. Does that make sense? Any questions from you guys on this? And then let them answer that. And what I found from doing this 7 billion times is they're rarely surprised. And when in the times that there is surprise, it's almost like the Jeff and Elizabeth version where they're like, oh, this is a lot easier than we thought it was. Hang on, I gotta let the dog out. Yeah, so that's the numbers. And that's the thing. I'm gonna summarize it again. That's the important part. $350,000 purchase, blah, blah, blah. I've been conservative here. I've been conservative there. Does this make sense? Do you have any questions? And I'm going to send this to you guys. When we're done with the meeting here today, I'm going to send this to you. And they'll go, great.
If you're thinking of 4 different places, you can plug them each in. And
Yeah. And then remember later when we're going through the process and we get to earnest money, I'll refer back to this and I'll go, that 5% that you put down is an early deposit of this. And they'll go, oh, right. So it's really important. Like you start talking about people writing checks or putting earnest money in, you got to put it in context as best you can, right? It's because honestly, if you don't say that, and this earnest money sounds really scary or whatever, but it's really just an early deposit of that number that we talked about earlier. And then they go, oh, okay. Right. Because if you don't say that, oh, you'll need I can just see people that I know being like, yeah, listen, $1,000 and then 5% and then it's yours. And then people go, oh, okay. And they don't know what the fuck's going on. Right. The explanation here is short and succinct, and it feels heavy right now, maybe, or when you get it down, until you get it down, it'll feel a bit like, oh, there's a lot of stuff to go over here, but then it just whips off,
yeah,
and then
for me, it's like
it.
putting it in the right language to make them comfortable.
That's right. And you're jovial and confident and nothing surprises you. And, it's an air,
This is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I know they asked me to teach that class on negotiations. And so I was like, okay, I'll just write a class, I guess, on negotiations for an hour. And I spent 20 minutes talking about like the vibe, being like, keep it cool. Like, don't be an asshole. No one's allowed to be a jerk. Right. Like half of negotiation is just posturing and standing up straight and being a professional. And I think that's the same thing in this conversation. Like you being able to competently explain things that are, and this is all very simple stuff. 4th grade math. I'll often say to people, agents especially, because I've taught this in classes before, and people be like, why can't a lender just do this? And I'll go, because you're supposed to be a fucking professional. That's why.
Right.
You're handling important processes.
Run you through that. Like I want to be the guy that's like, they come to me.
Right.
And I just don't like that. I don't know.
I know that Alex, for instance, like Alex, I don't really know him, but I'll call him and we'll go through the stuff or whatever. I knew from one of the first conversations we had, I remember you and I went over and met him face to face that one day. And then I've had phone conversations with him. And I knew after the first phone conversation I had with him that I was okay in his eyes, because I could just tell.
Yeah.
That the language was the same. Like if he had a question, he needed me to be competent. You know what I mean? And I always think like, if you're trying to talk to Alex Gutash and your whole thing is like, oh my God, aren't you guys fucking excited that you sold your kind of, like, you're dead. Like what are you, crazy? Like, you have to have your shit together. Having your shit together does wonders for this whole process. It doesn't, and Alex is not a really tough guy, but like you could see how he could be in certain situations maybe. Right. And his little, silly meltdowns are a little bit like that. Although very mild. Nothing that hard to deal with, but like, if you just know this stuff, which again is all 4th grade math, you can hang in every single conversation. You're fine. I even think your questions are great. Like the nuanced, like, oh, is it always 3 months? Or, it might depend on where it is in the year based on the amount of tax escrow that they take from you at the closing is right. Like, and then the ability, the next step is the ability to like have that conversation with a client that doesn't know as much.
Yeah.
And keep them on track. Sometimes people ask questions just to ask them, and because they're interested and curious. And it's like, if the wife is sitting there, or if it's the wife asking and the husband sitting there dumbfounded, I'll try to go, hey, listen, we should talk about this for hours on the phone one day, but for now, let's keep going and let's get through all this.
Well, that's kind of what's going through my head right now, is I think about like getting more clients, and like we talk about like the things to say at open houses.
Yeah.
What if I just said, how familiar are you with like closing costs and what you need to bring to closing?
Yeah, right. I think if it's funny, when you were just saying that, I was like, how am I thinking of the question that I think you're about to ask? It's like, if somebody were to go, Joe, what would we talk about if we came in to meet with you? Right.
Exactly.
Right. I think
oh, you guys first time home buyers? Yeah. Okay. You guys familiar with, what you guys have to bring to closing? And has anyone walked you through?
Yeah. You might say, it might go something like this, like where you go, Joe, you're buying a place. I'm sure you've heard of closing costs, right? And you go, yeah. You go, okay. The thing is nobody ever really sits down and explains to you. You're gonna have to bring $10,000 of other money. And most of the time, what you know is you need this cash. It's called closing costs. What you don't know is that you're buying services, and no one ever explains that. That's one of the things that we go over.
Yeah.
How much cash do you need and why? Not just you do. You're buying things. You're buying an insurance policy. You're putting money in escrow. You're paying the city of Chicago fees. What the fuck is that for? That's one of the things we go over. When's the best time? What's the best time of year to do this? Hey, our lease is up in the next April, but we have some flexibility. What do you think we should do? The strategy and timing of all that stuff. I love saying to people, any dummy, and I might say this exactly, any dummy can help you find a house. And in fact, let me say it even differently. You don't need somebody to help you find a house.
Yeah.
What we do as agents, and you don't even have to say what I do as agents, what a realtor is supposed to do is guide through the process, right? Help you make a more informed decision or set of decisions, because it's not just one decision. It's not, we found our place, hooray, right? It's a set of decisions, and our meeting sets you up for that, right? Something like somewhere in there. I think it's good. I mean, but you're right. It's, why would we meet? Well, I don't know. I was called strategy and timing. Right. Well, we know what we want. And it's like, okay, it's not just about what you want. But okay, if you don't want to meet, don't meet. Fine.
That's kind of what I'm trying to like get into too as I do my touches right now. Is I'm basically saying, like, to all the open house people I met, like, call me if you have any questions on how this is affecting the market or the process, because they might be like, well, I'm gonna wait to buy a home, but like, what the hell? Like, how can I even buy a home right now, even if I wanted to?
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just hoping that that kind of vagueness, but like, it makes me seem like I know,
Yeah.
even if I do work on it. You know what I mean?
Yep. You know how we were talking about YouTube the other day?
Mm-hmm.
And was I telling you about, there's this agent that I had heard about where all she does is like sit in her car and be like, and answer questions that clients have about like, why do you use attorneys in Chicago, right? I mean, she's not a Chicago person. She's from like Oklahoma or something. I don't know. But the idea that there would be like a buyer academy on our YouTube of this presentation broken out into different videos.
What if we just did like a 1.5 minute video where you and I just said, you might be wondering what transfer stamps are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here it
No,
is.
I think it's a great idea.
And then we can even, that's like even a touch for open house people.
Yeah.
Well, you're probably wondering what goes into closing costs. Like, I mean, that's a long one, but I think that that's something that we could easily do.
Yeah. No, that's the kind of content I think that we have to put out there. It's also like eminently Googleable. Like, it's the kind of shit that just comes up and you tag it right. And it's
And
a
it
lead
goes along
generation and credibility builder.
what you said. And I'm always trying to think of this too. It's like maybe it was the podcast I was listening to with you in it. Like, no one gives a shit about you posting, oh, I just sold this, and like the pat on the back. It's like, how
Right.
can you add value? And that's like a question. Like, people see you doing it, and that's great. But I think like a video of me explaining this.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the truth of it is, I mean, it is voyeuristic, right? People can look at you and that's what they want to do. They want to see what's doing and what's going on. And I happen to speak pretty well, and you do too. You have good presence, and we'll put some of this stuff on camera. It's really, really, really easy to do.
Like, could we do it now? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, practicing what would be said, but yeah, I mean, that's what I want to make this stuff look somewhat professional, but yeah, you know what I mean?
let's get started. I mean,
Yeah.
I have time and a computer.
Yeah.
I have a script.
Do a few of them. I mean, you want to get this stuff pretty hardcore down, but yeah, I mean, putting together a plan too of what we record and when. Justin Barr, who did those videos for us, the ones of me, we could do a set of. I mean, I want to be planful. Like, I want to go, okay, what are the ones that we want to make, and then, oh no. Okay, I might have to go.
Okay.
This was what we wanted to go over today anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is perfect.
Actually, let me just finish that last point. That I think I want to plan out like all of those not rudimentary, but like all those questions that we can answer, but then go, okay, we're gonna have to do some for sellers and some for buyers. And like, maybe we have Justin do some professional shots where, I mean, some of them we do on our phones and some of them we do, with Justin,
Yeah.
I want to make transactional videos and all that stuff, but yeah, we might be able to use the office too, which would be, if we go in there, because no one's there.
That's what I was thinking. Like, if you wanted to do this.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I'm sorry. I got to go help my wife.
No worries.
I'll send you this recording, and then you have this spreadsheet already, right?
I have the spreadsheet. I took a ton of notes down.
Okay.
Line by line, which is exactly what I wanted. So thanks.
Okay. All right. You got it. All right. I'll talk to you.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.